This is my favorite talk, so let's start. So the number one question, which calcium is bad? Case 1. Case 2. Okay? Thank you. I think my answer was, I don't know. Because this is IBUS, and we couldn't see the thickness. Both are 360 degrees of the calcium. We have to see the entire picture. Number 2, I can see the angiol, and once I see the angiol, you see the case 1 looks bad. You see a lot of calcium, but case 2 doesn't. This is a picture of the case 2. You see the lesion was not very impressive, and actually the main lesion was not calcified, and the proximal portion, which we didn't expect, was a calcium. This is a lesion, lipidic plaque, and the proximal segment is very, very focal circumferential calcium. Whenever you see very focal circumferential calcium, actually it's okay to just balloon, and we thought so, we did. This is after the balloon. You see the circumferential calcium was nicely fractured. How can you identify the fracture? You have to look for the outside, because once you have the fracture, there is no longer calcium on the top, and then you start seeing the outside. That's a good sign of the fracture. This case, at the site of the circumference fracture, calcium was nicely fractured, good stent expansion, fine. Second one is actually really, really bad calcium. So I'm going to show the movie because that's longitudinal information is important. Starting the distal, number 1, big artery, and you see the very circumferential calcium already, and that circumferential calcium is continue, still calcium, and still calcium, and this is a place where the rotor was done, as I showed, and the proximal portion, still calcium, circumferential, up to the end. So almost this case was entire segment was circumferential calcium. So those are the big difference. Even the one slice was circumferential, one is very short, this one is very, very long. That's indicating this is really big calcium chunk. And we consider this is bad calcium, and actually it was very difficult, a lot of work, and finally you see the post-stent picture. There is a multiple calcium fracture and nice stent expansion. So I think when we consider how to decide which device is good for the calcified region, you have to see the entire picture, how long, how thick, that's important. How about this case? This case was CTO, and you see the antegrade wire going to the distal portion nicely, and after the pre-dilatation, you see the non-opening segment in the middle of the balloon. And this is a picture. Again, we see the circumferential calcium. This calcium also short, and we thought it's okay to making the fracture using the balloon. And we're using the cutting balloon, and this is after. This is the place where you have the circumferential calcium. One more time. This is the place you have the circumferential calcium. What is this? It's really clear to fracture in both sides. Confirming this fracture is very important. And this is before circumferential calcium. After cutting balloon, exact same place, you see the 2 fracture. After stent, nice stent expansion. So before stenting, how you identify the fracture is very important. We summarize what is important of the calcium treatment strategy. Number 1, whether you see the angiographic calcium, yes or no, that's first question. If yes, you should ask more than 270, because I do think less than 270 is very rare having done the expansion. And then we prepare the calcium score. Let's go through one by one. Number 1, 360 degrees calcium. Even one slice, if you have to make the fracture. Otherwise, you never ever expand. Number 2 is the length. More than 270, longer than 5 millimeter. Total amount of the calcium, which I show in the case 1, that's important. Number 3 is calcified nodule. Calcified nodule is really the marker of the chunk of the calcium behind. That's important. Number 4 is vessel size. People ask me why you put the vessel size as a part of the calcium score. It's because if you put the same pressure, if you put the 3O segment versus 4 segment, the vessel wall tension is correlate with the radius of the vessel size. So if you put the same pressure into the left domain and meteorology is different. So making the good fracture, you need a good pressure, and vessel size does matter. So altogether, that's a calcium score. And if this is more than 2, we recommend to do additional treatment. And there is a very clear interaction between the calcium score and procedure treatment. And if you do the atherectomy in the high score, you can make it better. But if you low score, making the atherectomy doesn't affect at all. So really important, what type of calcium you need additional treatment. Let's step back. Why I'm saying the angiographic appearance is important is based on this data. And we did the comparison between the IVUS and OCT and angio, how their appearance correlate each other. If you have the angiographic appearance, you see large calcium by IVUS or OCT. However, if you look in this segment, even though I see the large calcium, more than 270, some of the calcium, angiographic no appearance. What is this? This is a case example. You see the big calcium by IVUS, angiographically no calcium. We look into the OCT in the same case. You see the calcium is big, but those calcium is quite thin. Because of the thin calcium, total amount of the calcium is not so much. We couldn't see by angio. And we compare those two cohorts one by one, meaning we picking up the more than 180 of the calcium by IVUS, and we check the OCT. If angiographic non-visible, those calcium was thin, less than 0.5 millimeter thickness is the most, and total maximum thickness of also thinner. Then ultimately, even though the large calcium, if not angiographic visible, their stent expansion is good. So those are the very important. Start with the angio. If you don't see, that's a good sign indicating the thin calcium. Then we make the calcium score because we have to see the entire picture, not only the arc, not only the length, but of the thickness. And finally, we develop thickness, arc, and length is important. But after publishing this paper, I thought I did a mistake. And because we're using the maximum thickness of calcium, that's actually a little bit mistake. And please consider this calcium score indicating any kind of calcium, including small arc of the calcium. And ultimately, this score worked well. If the score is high, poor stent expansion. But what we did mistake is actually what is the most important predict calcium fracture is the thinnest calcium thickness. And this is a case cohort which include only the treated by balloon and stent, and we just based on the thickness of the calcium in the thinnest thickness. And if the thinnest thickness is thinner, they are most likely making the fracture without anything. But if the calcium thickness in the thinnest point is thicker, we cannot make the fracture. This is actually the most important. And there is a different people talking the cutoff value, what type of the device can make the fracture. And if the thinnest thickness is thinner, we can make the fracture, even the balloon only. And a little bit thicker, we can make the fracture by cutting balloon. And the thinness is thicker, we can make the fracture only using the rotor or orbitally. So thinnest thickness does matter. And based on this, we make the new calcium score. And now thinnest thickness is the most important, more than 0.3 millimeter thickness. That's we think the most important. Those are the new score based on the OCT. Okay, so those are the evidence, but when we're talking the actual case, we have to be more detailed. So let's go through one case together, how to decide what type of the device and how to decide to end the procedure. So this is the 84-year-old female, and you see the chunk of the calcium in the LED. And we did the balloon rupture, 2-5 rupture, IVUS doesn't close, and then finally we did the rotor. And this is the IVUS after the rotor. You see the nice reverberation. This is new reverberation. How you can define the rotablator effect is at the site of the IVUS catheter, look for the new reverberation. If you see this type of reverberation, that's meaning you're polishing the surface. And then you have to look for how it looks like the other segment, because the calcium is not focal. Many times it's very heterogeneous. And this case, we see the nice polishment of the reverberation here and here, but we couldn't see any calcium fracture. So we have to do more. And then you have to decide the vessel size. at the site of the calcium by IBUS, looking for the vessel size is actually quite difficult because everything is shadowing. And look for adjacent segment. In this case, even though there is a calcium adjacent segment, we can measure the media to media. It was 3.0. And because of this, we decided in the cutting balloon and using the 2.5. Because 3.0 round down because of the cutting balloon is semi-compliant. And this is after the cutting balloon, same segment. You see the nice fracture here, nice fracture here. And again, how you can identify the fracture, look for the outside. Once you start seeing the outside structure, there is no calcium on the top, so that's meaning the fracture. At the same time, sometimes blunt, sometimes wire, mimicking the picture of the fracture, which you have to differentiate. At the end, what is important, whenever you have the big calcium, you really have to confirm every calcium was nicely fractured, and we confirm. And next, you have to decide how big the size of the stent to cover the entire calcium. And after the additional treatment, many times vessel larger compared to the before, so we reanalyze of the vessel size, and distal portion was 3.4, middle is 3.7, and proximal is 4.0. We decide total stent should be longer, and then finally we decide 48 millimeter stent and non-compliant balloon because this is very tapered artery. We're using the 3.5, 3.75 to expand entire segment. At the end, you have to confirm each calcium segment was well expanded, and you see the smallest area is 4.6, but compared to the distal, this is good, and this is the most calcified segment, now making good fracture and extended, and finally everywhere is good stent expansion. So those type of the diffuse calcium, you have to step by step. Number one, how big the size, and then making the good fracture, and then at the end, where to where you treat, and everywhere is good stent expansion. Those are the process of the treatment of the diffuse calcified lesion. And this is final result. Okay, so those are the whole story, but there is some exception. I'm going to show the two different exceptions. This is a patient, 76-year-old male, and severe AS, and we thought this patient should have the very calcified because severe AS and old patient. But when we look into the angio, yes, there is a calcium, but not much impressive calcium by angio. And we took the IBUS, and this is the picture. And I'm very impressed this case because lesion was very negatively modeling and very eccentric calcium. And compared to the distal, it's much smaller. And this type of the eccentric calcium with negative remodeling, this is really the exception which we consider the treatment. Because if we treat this type of eccentric calcium, just balloon and stent, it's going to be underexpanded. So this is a very rare scenario. We may consider additional treatment, even though the calcium was not too big. And because of the IBUS cluster hitting the surface of the calcium, so we thought that doing the rotablator orbitally should be the good idea. And we perform. And because of the negative remodeling. And this is afterwards, you see the new reverberation after the orbitally at the site of the calcium. And then after stent, I'm so impressed. Even such eccentric calcium, we see the nice calcium fracture, making the good stent expansion at the end, which is 7.2. I don't think that happened without some additional treatment. And to answer that question, we systematically look into the all region which having the less than 180 degree calcium. This is about 1,000 cases. And we found underexpansion is only 3.6%, which is very rare. However, if underexpansion occur, where most of the time that's mid-LED, and what we found is mid-LED is important, also the negative remodeling is important, and large concentric calcium is important. So if that is altogether, even less than 180 degree, that's causing the underexpansion up to 30%. So those we have to consider more carefully in terms of the calcium treatment. And this one is Ajay's case, also surprise. 64 male and CKD, and I don't have the angio picture. You just see the very thick calcium in the proximal LED. And we are very exciting because we see the bunch of the calcium, and we thought this is a very big, important treatment. However, when we look into the IBUS, I'm very surprised because I don't see a bunch of the calcium. when you look into the surface, is calcium is not too much. None of the place is more than 180. And I said, this is easy calcium, it's okay. This is mainly soft plaque. That's what we thought. And we balloon, but doesn't open well. And Jay wanted the IVA, even I against, he did, but IVA doesn't work. And at the end, we balloon. At the end, okay expansion, but not impressive expansion. And this is a type of the case which typically difficult, eccentric, surface is not too much, and we thought it's okay, we may have to do more, that's our learning point. To summarize, angiographic calcium visibility correlates with the total amount of the calcium. Therefore, non-angiographic visible calcium doesn't inhibit stent expansion. Start with the angiographic appearance is important. Number two, when you see the angiographic visible calcium, evaluation of the total amount of calcium, arc thickness length dictates necessity of the calcium modification. That's important. Thinnest calcium thickness is the most important to predict calcium fracture. That is really the mechanism of the good stent expansion in the calcified region. And finally, even though that's rare, there are some exceptions, like I showed. Very negatively modeling mid-LRD eccentric calcium, we may need something more. And very deep thick calcium, we thought it's okay, but it's not okay expansion. How to deal with, we have to work more. Thank you very much.